High in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, there stands a house so large, so grand, that even today it almost feels unreal. This is not a palace built by kings. This was built by an American, a young man with more money than imagination and more dreams than time. This is the story of the Biltmore Estate, the largest private home ever built in America, and the quiet truth behind its beauty. The year was 1890. America was changing faster than ever before. The Civil War was over, industry was booming, railroads connected the nation, and a new class was rising, America's industrial elite. They would later be called the robber barons, but at the time they were seen as the builders of a new nation. George Washington Vanderbilt II was not loud, he was not aggressive, and he did not run the family empire. That empire belonged to the railroads built by his grandfather, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the richest man in American history. By modern standards, the Vanderbilt fortune would be worth over $200 billion. George was born into unimaginable wealth, but unlike many heirs, he was different. George Vanderbilt loved books, he loved art, he loved architecture, he read thousands of volumes, he traveled throughout Europe, and he fell in love with the great chateaus of France. George did not dream of running railroads, he dreamed of building something timeless. In the early 1990s, George Vanderbilt found his place. More than 125,000 acres of land in the mountains of North Carolina. What he imagined was not just a home, it was an entire world. Construction began in 1889, and from the very beginning, it was clear this would be something America had never seen. George hired Richard Morris Hunt, America's most famous architect. The design was inspired by French Renaissance castles, but this would be bigger, much bigger. The Biltmore Estate would contain 250 rooms, over 10,000 tons of stone, miles of wiring, its own power plant. At a time when most Americans had no electricity at all. More than 1,000 workers helped build Biltmore, and once complete, it required hundreds of staff to function. Cooks, gardeners, maids, stable hands. An entire village was created just to support one family. In 1895, Biltmore was finally complete. A home built not for comfort, but for eternity. But behind its beauty, a slow and silent cost had already begun. When guests first stepped inside Biltmore, many were left speechless. This was not a home, it was a statement. At the heart of Biltmore stood its greatest treasure, not gold, not jewels, but knowledge. George Vanderbilt's private library held over 23,000 books, one of the largest private collections in America. In a time when many Americans struggled to read, George lived surrounded by words. Dinner at Biltmore was formal, quiet, almost ceremonial. Servants moved silently. Meals were perfectly timed. Conversation was polite, never loud. But despite the grandeur, something was missing. Warmth. Many rooms were rarely used. Some were never used at all. The house was always cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. George Vanderbilt had built a dream so large that it swallowed intimacy. Below the marble and chandeliers was another world. Servants worked long hours, invisible, silent. Biltmore functioned like a small city, and cities are expensive. Luxury has a price, and Biltmore's price never stopped rising. Heating 250 rooms, maintaining gardens larger than Central Park, paying hundreds of staff. Every single day, money flowed out. Even the Vanderbilt fortune could not ignore it. George Vanderbilt was a thinker, not a manager. He trusted others with finances, and he spent freely. Biltmore did not generate wealth, it consumed it. To his credit, George eventually understood the danger. He hired a young forester named Gifford Pinchot, who later became America's first chief forester. Together, they turned Biltmore into a model of sustainable forestry. But by then, the damage was already done. In 1914, George Vanderbilt died at the age of 51. He left behind a widow and a dream that was becoming impossible to maintain. His wife, Edith, tried to save Biltmore. Land was sold. Art was sold. Rooms were closed. But the world was changing. The Great Depression arrived. Fortunes collapsed. Values shifted. Massive private estates no longer represented success. Eventually, Biltmore opened its doors to the public, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a lesson. Biltmore Estate still stands today, majestic, beautiful. But it tells us something important. The American dream was never about size, it was about balance. George Vanderbilt built the greatest house in America, but even he could not escape a simple truth. Luxury fades, values last. And perhaps the real legacy of Biltmore is not how large it was, but what it reminds us not to become.